All right, let's dive in. Today, we're looking at, well, it's Walgreens.
Okay.
And it's kind of a weird story, right? I mean, you see Walgreens like everywhere.
Yeah.
You can't, drive down the street without seeing one, but apparently they're not doing so hot.
Right.
Like, really not so hot. We're talking, like, considering going private from a valuation of, like, $100 billion at one point. So,
Right.
pretty crazy. We're looking at this article called The Shocking Decline of Walgreens, What Went Wrong. And yeah, it's kind of a wild ride.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they see Walgreens everywhere, just kind of assume they're doing well, right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting about this article is that it kind of suggests that maybe all that growth wasn't actually a good thing.
Oh, interesting.
So they talk about like how Walgreens just kind of went on this massive expansion spree,
Like buying up everybody.
Yeah, like they acquired Dwayne Reed, they acquired Alliance Boots. They really wanted to be everywhere.
Yeah. It's actually kind of wild how many there are. I mean, I think the article says something like 78% of Americans live within like 5 miles of a Walgreens.
Exactly. So you would think with that much market penetration, they'd be like raking it in.
Yeah, totally.
But what they did was, instead of focusing on like strategically opening stores in profitable locations, they just kind of went for this blanket approach, assuming that like market saturation would equal market dominance.
Interesting. So just like being everywhere, being convenient was the main goal.
Yeah, that seems to have been the thinking. And I guess it worked for a while, but in the long run, it really started to hurt their profitability. They were spreading themselves too thin.
I see. And you think like a pharmacy would be a pretty safe bet, like people need their prescriptions filled. Gotta be a moneymaker.
Right. You would think that. But turns out the pharmacy world is a lot more complicated than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on pharmacies these days. Well, you've got like the rise of online pharmacies. Think, Amazon Pharmacy, for example.
Right.
That's putting pressure on everyone. And then there's the whole issue of generic drugs, which are obviously great for consumers.
Yeah.
But they have much lower profit margins for pharmacies.
I see. And you know what? Now that you mention it, I actually do most of my refills online now.
See?
It's just so easy. Click, click, boom, it shows up at your door.
Exactly. So that's one factor. And then on top of that, you have these things called pharmacy benefit managers. Have you ever heard of these?
I don't think so.
Okay, so PBMs, they're basically the middlemen between pharmacies and drug companies and insurance plans.
Ah, okay.
And they negotiate drug prices.
So like they're the gatekeepers of the prescription world.
Exactly. And the problem is they have a ton of negotiating power.
I see.
And that can really squeeze pharmacy profits. Some people argue they even distort drug pricing. And it's gotten so bad that the Walgreens CEO himself has said that the current pharmacy model is not sustainable.
Really?
Yeah. So that's, kind of a dire statement.
Yeah. So if their pharmacy business is struggling, what about just the retail side of things? Walgreens is all about convenience. Like I always think of them as like the go-to for a quick purchase, if you need like toothpaste or a bottle of water.
Right. But that's actually part of the problem.
Hmm.
So what happened was their strength, which was being everywhere, kind of turned into a weakness when the economy started to shift.
Like with inflation and interest rates and all that.
Exactly. People became way more price sensitive, so they started going to discount stores like Walmart and Target where they could find cheaper alternatives.
Yeah, I've definitely been comparing prices a lot more lately too. Every time I buy something, it's like, is this really the best deal?
Right. So basically, Walgreens is getting hit from both sides. Fewer people are filling prescriptions there because of online competition and PBMs. And then those who do go to Walgreens aren't spending as much on other stuff because they're watching their wallets.
Yeah, it's like a double whammy. So if their core business model is in trouble, that makes me think about their big push into healthcare. They spent billions on companies like VillageMD and Summit Health.
Yeah.
Did they just like totally miss the mark there?
Well, it seems like they were trying to follow CVS's lead,
With the whole PBM and insurance thing.
Exactly. But Walgreens went all in on primary care, like doctor's offices.
Okay.
And they didn't really have the scale to make it work. They ended up taking a $6 billion goodwill impairment charge.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's safe to say they didn't quite stick the landing there.
Yeah, like they jumped on the healthcare train without really knowing where it was going.
Right. And it kind of raises questions about their long-term strategy. I mean, since then, they've kind of shifted back to focusing on their existing pharmacy operations.
Hmm.
It seems like maybe they're not quite sure what direction they want to go in.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder what led them to make these decisions in the first place, especially considering their history. Like, according to the article, they were family-led for almost a century.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And since the Walgreen family stepped back from running the company, there have been like 7 different CEOs,
Wow.
and none of them have lasted more than like 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So, maybe that lack of continuity had something to do with it. It's hard to say for sure, but it's certainly a factor worth considering.
It's like a ship with a new captain every few years.
Oh.
Speaking of rough waters, the article also talks about all the lawsuits they've been hit with.
Oh, yeah. It hasn't been a good time for them on the legal front either. They've had multiple lawsuits costing them millions of dollars.
It's just bad for their image overall.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And some of them are pretty serious, especially those related to the opioid crisis.
Right, right. And it's crazy, even something like shoplifting, which might seem like a small issue compared to everything else, is causing them a lot of trouble.
Yeah, that's one of the more surprising things I learned from the article.
Yeah.
So shoplifting has been on the rise everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And Walgreens has responded by increasing security measures in their stores. Things like, locking up merchandise.
Yeah, yeah.
But what they found is that this actually hurts their sales because it makes shopping less convenient for honest customers.
Right, right. And the article even quotes the CEO saying, when you lock things up, you don't sell as many of them.
Exactly. So their attempts to solve one problem have kind of backfired and reinforced the negative trends they were already facing.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground already. Questionable expansion strategies, pharmacy woes, failed healthcare ventures, leadership changes, lawsuits, even the unexpected consequences of shoplifting. Walgreens is really facing a perfect storm, huh?
Yeah, it's a pretty complicated situation.
Yeah.
And the big question is, can they turn things around?
Right, and that's what we'll be exploring in part 2. We'll look at some of the strategies they're trying and what the experts have to say about their chances of success. So stay tuned. So we've painted kind of a bleak picture for Walgreens,
Yeah.
But the article doesn't just focus on the problems. They do talk about some ways that, Walgreens is trying to kind of turn things around.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they're just sitting back and, letting this happen to them.
Yeah.
They're actively trying to adapt to this new reality.
Okay. So what are they doing? What's the plan?
Well, one of their key initiatives is this whole modernization effort,
Okay.
which basically involves streamlining operations, investing in technology, and really focusing on the customer experience.
Modernization. I mean, that sounds good in theory, but what does that actually look like?
Yeah, so one of the things they're doing is setting up these micro-fulfillment centers.
Micro-fulfillment centers. Okay.
Yeah, but basically these are like mini automated warehouses that
Yeah.
they're putting inside their stores.
Mm.
And the idea is to speed up prescription filling and free up pharmacists to do more, patient interaction, like, counseling and stuff like that.
So bringing kind of the efficiency of the online pharmacies into the physical world.
Exactly.
Smart. Especially since everyone, seems to want everything to be more convenient these days.
Right. And speaking of convenience, they're also testing drone delivery for prescriptions in some areas.
Wait, drones delivering medicine? That's like some sci-fi stuff.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But it can be really helpful for people who have trouble getting to a store, especially in rural areas, or for people with mobility issues.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it seems like they're really trying to keep up with the digital giants.
Yeah, for sure. And they're investing a lot in their digital platforms, too. Making it easier for customers to manage their prescriptions online, shop for other products, and access healthcare services.
So basically becoming more like Amazon.
In some ways, yeah.
Yeah.
But they still have this huge network of physical stores.
Right. What are they going to do with all those?
Well, they're not abandoning them completely.
Yeah.
They're just trying to figure out how to make them more relevant. So they're experimenting with different store formats,
Like what?
like smaller locations with a more curated selection of products that are tailored to the local community's needs.
Okay. So less like a big superstore and more like a specialized neighborhood shop.
Exactly. They want to make them more like destinations, places where people actually want to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. But all this sounds pretty expensive.
It is.
Can they even afford it? Like, we just talked about how much they're struggling financially.
Right. That's the big question. To free up cash flow, they've been closing underperforming stores.
Okay.
They've been cutting costs, and they even suspended their dividend.
Whoa. Suspending their dividend. That's a pretty drastic move. I mean, especially for a company that's, had this history of nearly a century of dividend payouts.
I know, right? It shows just how seriously they're taking this situation. But whether it'll be enough to fund all these ambitious plans is another matter.
Yeah, yeah. It's like they're walking a tightrope trying to manage these short-term pressures while also investing for the future. And what about all the things that are out of their control? Like, what if interest rates keep going up? Or what if there's a recession?
Right. All those things could easily derail their turnaround efforts. I mean, it's definitely a risky situation.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to rebuild the engine while the plane is still in flight. And,
Mhm.
we've talked a lot about their internal strategies and all that, but I'm curious about the bigger picture. Like, what do Walgreens' struggles tell us about the retail and healthcare industries in general?
Well, I think Walgreens' decline is really a reflection of the challenges that all traditional retailers are facing in the digital age. I
Mm.
mean, everyone is trying to figure out how to compete with online giants like Amazon, how to adapt to new technologies, how to keep up with changing consumer habits.
Yeah. It's a reminder that even the biggest companies aren't immune to disruption.
Exactly. I
Mhm.
mean, Walgreens' story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of overexpansion,
Right.
about strategic missteps,
Yeah.
and, about failing to adapt quickly enough.
Right, right. But it also highlights how important pharmacies are to our healthcare system. Like, yeah, a lot of people love the convenience of ordering their meds online, but a lot of people still really value that personal interaction with a pharmacist.
Yeah, absolutely. And Walgreens is trying to capitalize on that by emphasizing the role of their pharmacists as like healthcare providers,
Yeah.
offering things like vaccinations, health screenings, consultations.
So not just a place to pick up your prescriptions, but more like a trusted source of, healthcare advice and services.
Exactly. They're betting that human connection and expertise will always have value, even in a tech-driven world.
It's a good strategy, but it's going to be tough, right? I mean, they're going up against some pretty stiff competition.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they have to convince consumers that they can offer both convenience and personalized care.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I guess the question is, can Walgreens overcome these challenges and emerge stronger on the other side?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think the next few years will be critical. Their success really hinges on their ability to execute their modernization plans, manage their finances effectively, and navigate all these external pressures that are, kind of out of their control.
It's like a high-stakes game with an uncertain outcome.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
But regardless of what happens to Walgreens specifically, I think the lessons from their experience are valuable for businesses in any industry.
totally. It's a reminder that in today's rapidly changing world, standing still is not an option.
Exactly. Companies have to be adaptable. They have to be innovative. They have to be willing to embrace change. Or they risk becoming the next cautionary tale.
Well said. We'll be back with part 3 to explore some alternative perspectives and delve into the potential long-term consequences of Walgreens' decline. We've been talking a lot about like the business side of this whole Walgreens thing.
Yeah.
But what about the people?
Right.
Like what happens to, the employees and the communities they serve if Walgreens keeps struggling?
Yeah, that's a really important point. I mean, we've already seen thousands of stores close,
Right.
which means thousands of jobs lost. And, in a lot of communities, especially in rural areas, the local Walgreens wasn't just a store.
Yeah.
It was a vital healthcare resource.
Yeah.
It was a community hub.
Right, right. It's easy to get caught up in all the, the financial analysis and stuff
Yeah,
and forget about the real people who are affected by these decisions.
exactly. And it's not just about the individuals either.
Yeah.
There are broader societal implications to consider. Well, if access to healthcare is reduced, especially for people who rely on local pharmacies, that could have a real impact on public health.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, we've already seen these things called healthcare deserts emerge in some areas.
Right.
Could Walgreens' decline actually make that problem worse?
It's definitely a possibility. And it raises questions about, the role of government
Yep.
in ensuring that everyone has access to affordable healthcare.
Right.
Like, should we be considering policies to protect essential businesses like pharmacies, especially in underserved communities?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really complex issue,
Yeah.
but definitely an important one to think about as the healthcare landscape keeps changing. Speaking of changing, I'm curious about Walgreens' competitors,
Yeah. Yeah.
What are they thinking about all this? Like, are they secretly celebrating?
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
Less competition, more market share. But it's not that simple.
Really?
Yeah, because a weakened Walgreens could actually be bad for the whole industry.
How so?
Well, less competition often leads to higher prices, less innovation, fewer choices for consumers.
Oh, right. It's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. If one boat starts sinking, everyone is affected.
Exactly. And it could also create an opening for, the online giants like Amazon to further dominate the market.
Right. And that's kind of a mixed bag, right? Like, on the one hand, Amazon is great for convenience and low prices.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, their growing power is, a little concerning.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, it really comes down to, like, what do we value more, convenience or control?
Right.
And ultimately, it's our choices as consumers that will determine which businesses thrive and which ones struggle.
Oh, that's a good point. We're not just watching this happen. We're actually part of the story.
Exactly. Every purchase we make is a vote for the kind of world we want to live in.
Wow. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Walgreens, I'm kind of struck by how complex all of this is.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just about one company. It's about, like, the intersection of technology and healthcare and economics and societal values.
Yeah. It's like all these different forces colliding.
And I think the most important takeaway isn't necessarily the answers we've found, but the questions we've raised.
Questions about like the future of retail, the role of pharmacies in our communities, the balance between convenience and care, and the impact of our choices as consumers.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good place to leave it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the curious case of Walgreens.
It's been a fascinating journey. Until next time. As always, subscribe to our channel, like the video, and comment below. There are also some links in our description that you may find useful. See you in the next episode. Bye-bye.